Having your web pages fade in and out is a really nice and also very simple effect to implement. Let's take a look at exactly what I mean by having it fade in and out. When I come down here and click on a link to another page, take a notice at how the page slowly fades out and then slowly fades back into the next page. Let's take a look at one more. You can see how it fades and then fades back in. This is being controlled by JavaScript, and specifically I'm using the jQuery fade in and fade out functions to make this effect work. So there's a few very important things that we need to do to make this work correctly. The first thing is up here in the head of our document, I'm including the jQuery library. Your website may already have this, and if it does, then you don't need to worry about it. If it doesn't, then you're going to need to include this line of code right up here, which is basically linking to a Google hosted version of jQuery. So this is on the googleapis.com website. And you could actually just do a Google search for this. You could say Google hosted jQuery library, and it'll come up. It'll be the first result. So the first thing, you're going to put this in the head of your document. The next thing you'll notice is I'm actually putting this JavaScript in a bit of an odd place. And it is right as soon as we start the body tag. It's the very first thing. And the reason for that will make sense in just a second. If we take a look at the very first line here, I'm targeting the body, and I'm giving it a display of none. So typically people either will put their JavaScript in the head of the document up top, or they're going to put it all the way down at the footer at the very bottom. The reason I can't do either one of those is because I want this line of code to load as soon as the body loads. And if we put it at the footer, then we would be waiting for everything else to load before we would call this line of code. And if I put it up here in the head, then JavaScript would be looking for the tag named body, but it wouldn't yet exist because if we put this line up here, for example, it's now looking for the body tag, but it can only look above itself in the document, and the body tag doesn't yet exist. So we're putting it here as the very first thing inside of the body. So I'm giving it a CSS display none. Now the reason I do this in JavaScript as opposed to CSS is for accessibility, and just in case somebody comes to your website and they don't have JavaScript enabled, then this fading effect just won't happen. It'll just load like a regular website. If I did this in CSS right here, this body CSS display none, if I did that using normal CSS, then the body would have a display of none for people who don't have JavaScript enabled, and it would just stay as display none, and your entire website would just be completely blank. So right after this line, the next thing I have is the jQuery document ready function, which basically just waits until all of the assets in your website have finished loading. So that function wraps from here all the way down through here, and everything else is inside of this ready function. So all of these lines of code here only get called once everything else on your website has already loaded. And the very first thing I do once everything's loaded is I'm going to target the body again, and I'm going to use the jQuery function of fade in, which is going to give it that nice fading animation and bring it back to a display of block. So that's really all there is to loading the page, is we first make it invisible, and then as soon as it's ready to be loaded, we fade it in slowly. The rest of this is for the fade out effect. And if we look down here, I'm targeting all of my A tags, so all of my anchor tags, which are going to links throughout the entire website. I'm targeting them, and I'm saying on click, so when they're clicked, I'm going to run this function, and I'm going to capture the click event. Now I'm setting a variable named the target, and I'm setting it equal to this, which would be whatever anchor tag was clicked on, and its attribute of target. Now the reason I'm doing this is because if your anchor tag has a target of blank, which we're testing for right here, then I don't want to have the fade out effect because this is already going to open in a new tab. And if it's opening in a new tab, then we can't really fade to that tab. This is really only for a single window operation here. So I have the if statement here, and I'm saying if the target of the anchor tag is not blank, meaning we're intended to stay on that tab, then we're going to run the rest of this function right here. And the first thing we're doing is we're setting a new variable, which is the href, which is this, which is still the anchor tag up here. So I'm getting the href of the anchor tag, which the href is just where you're linking to. The next thing we're doing here is we're preventing the default functionality of the event being clicking on an anchor tag. So we're preventing that link from taking someone to their new page. And instead of doing that, we're again going to target the body, and we're going to fade it out. And then once it's faded out, we're going to go to the href, which we set up here as the link. So I'm just going to show you how this works real quick. I'm going to uncomment this line right here, and I'll comment this line right here, and I'll save it and upload it to my server. And if I refresh the page, and now click on a link, you'll see that it faded out the website, and it gave me the href right here, which was the link that I clicked on. But when I press OK, nothing happens. It doesn't go to that because I commented out this window.location. So that's not really what we want. We're going to keep it like this with the window.location equals the href, and that is basically saying to take your window to the location of the href up here. So I'm going to refresh the page, and let's just take one more look at this. When I click on this link right here, you can see it fades out and fades back in to this new page. The last few lines of the script down here, we have this set timeout, and inside that is a function which is the same as the fade in function, and we're waiting 1,000 milliseconds or 1 second to do this. The reason that I add this down at the bottom, and if you notice it's outside of the ready function, so the document ready function starts here, it ends right here, and outside of that we have this timeout. The reason for that is because sometimes you'll be on a website and there might be one asset or one script or something that's taking a really long time to load. There might be some sort of loop in a JavaScript file or an image that's really, really large and it's taking a long time to load, or there could be a lot of different reasons that this jQuery document ready function takes a long time to activate. So just in case it's taking a long time to be called, we do this and we say it's going to wait a maximum of 1 second before fading in. So if it's already faded in within 1 second, then this doesn't even happen at all. But if it's taking more than 1 second to call the ready function, then we're going to fall back and do this. This script will be available on your screen. I'm not sure, it's either going to be a download link or I'm just going to copy and paste it, whichever one just seems to be a little bit cleaner, but you'll see it, it'll be on your screen right now. And you'll be able to have this really nice effect. The last thing I'll just show you real quick, in case you're not sure if your website has jQuery on it, you can come over here and click on Inspect Element. And it doesn't matter where you did it, you could do it anywhere on the page. You come over to the console, and you just type in J with a lowercase, and then a capital Q, U-E-R-Y. So it needs to be exactly like that, with the lowercase j, uppercase Q, and the rest of it. And when you press enter, if it says undefined, then you do not have jQuery on your website. If it gives you something like this, function AB, depending on your version of jQuery, it might give you something a little bit different, but as long as you get something, that means you have jQuery. If it just says undefined, I'll just show you real quick. I'll just remove this line of code, put it up on the server, and when I refresh and come back to the console, now I get all these errors, obviously, because my website is dependent on jQuery. But when I type that in, it says unquote reference jQuery is not defined.